It's been 50 years since James Douglas Morrison, mainly known as Jim Morrison, the lead singer of The Doors, passed away on July 3rd, 1971 at the age of 27. Him and Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones both died on July 3rd, just a day before 4th of July, which I have to say is pretty weird and a coincidence that they both died on the same day before 4th of July, just 2 years apart. Brian Jones died in 1969, and Jim Morrison died 2 years later in 1971. Jim has two nicknames. The Lizard King, of course, which was taken from his poem, The Celebration of the Lizard King, and Mr. Mojo Rising, an anagram of himself. He was also a songwriter and poet. Jim developed an alcohol dependency in the 1960s, which affected his performance on stage at times. Here is a mugshot of Jim taken on September 20th, 1970, just 2 days after Jimi Hendrix's death and before Janis Joplin's death. After the Doors recorded their sixth album, L.A. Woman, Jim told the group that he was going to Paris with his girlfriend, Pamela Courson. During his time in Paris, Jim shaved his beard and lost some weight. And this is one of the last photos of him before he died. On July 3rd, 1971, Jim died in Paris, France. Pamela found him unresponsive in a bathtub at 6 o'clock in the morning. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but no autopsy was performed since it is not acquired by French law. Jim actually died of an accidental heroin overdose. Isn't that something? That's crazy that acquired by French law, they don't do autopsies. He died 10 months after Jimi Hendrix and 9 months after Janis Joplin. Jim was buried in a Paris cemetery. Now, some of you guys are probably wondering, well, how come his body wasn't shipped back to L.A.? Why was he buried in Paris, France? Hey, good question. I mean, he obviously loved Paris, France. Paris was like his escape away from music and all the crap he was going through with the drugs and trouble with the law that he was going through in L.A. So that was pretty much his escape, to get away from the limelight and the Hollywood and all that crap. So I guess they figured that, they might as well have him buried in Paris instead of shipping his body back to L.A. So all the fans of The Doors and Jim Morrison, they pretty much had to visit him at the cemetery. The ones who live in L.A. or whatever, they obviously had to come all the way to Paris to visit. If they were able to, they could have just shipped his body to L.A., maybe have a funeral, and then maybe shipped it back to Paris, France, and bury him at the Paris cemetery still. But I don't know, maybe that'd be too much flying back and forth. But yeah, Jim's girlfriend, Pamela, she died 3 years after his death. And she also died at the age of 27 in Los Angeles, California on April 25th, 1974. So she also died and is part of the 27 Club just like him. And she also died of a heroin overdose. And she ended up getting cremated. Now, that's also very weird and ironic and such a coincidence. Something crazy about that 27 Club. I feel like she obviously missed Jim so much that maybe it got to the point where she just didn't want to live anymore, and she ended up dying the same way he did and died the same age. I'm sure she was obviously hurt when she found Jim unresponsive in that bathtub, and she still was having problems after his death. So hey, the Doors continued without Jim after his death. They released their seventh and final album in 1978, An American Prayer, as Jim was featured posthumously. After that, the Doors pretty much didn't continue as a band going into the 80s and so forth. Obviously, the Doors were just not the same without Jim Morrison. I mean, he was the lead singer of the band. I mean, the Doors is not the same without Jim Morrison. Just like the Beatles is not the same without John Lennon and George Harrison. TLC is not the same without Left Eye. Run DMC is not the same without Jam Master Jay. In 1993, the Doors were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So that's it. Rest in peace to Jim Morrison. I know Ray Manzarek passed away, but the only two remaining bandmates of the Doors left are Robbie Krieger and John Densmore. while Jim Morrison and Ray Manzarek have passed away. So they have the two remaining members of the Doors left. It's just like how with the Beatles, it's just Paul McCartney and Ringo left. Of course, speaking of the 27 Club, obviously Amy Winehouse's 10th death anniversary is this Friday, July 23rd. Can't believe it's almost 10 years since Amy passed away. All right, that's it. See you later.